The day I found out about Luke's affair wasn't a whirlwind of accusations or melodramatic revelations. It was a quieter devastation, creeping in through the cracks of my already fragile life. It was an ordinary Saturday morning. Caleb, our 3-year-old, was in the living room building towers out of his toy blocks while I stood at the kitchen sink, washing the breakfast dishes. Luke, my husband of 6 years, sat at the table behind me, scrolling through his phone. He was talking, something about a new project at the architecture firm, but it wasn't his words that caught my attention. It was the name. "Julia thinks the client will go for the modern design," he said casually, like she was just another part of his day. But she wasn't just another part of his day. Not to me. Julia was a name I'd heard before, his co-worker, bright and ambitious, the one who always had a clever solution at work meetings. I hadn't thought much about her until recently, when her name started slipping into more of Luke's stories. Little mentions here and there. At first I dismissed it. Of course he'd talk about his co-workers. That's normal, isn't it? But there was something about the way he said her name now, soft and familiar, that made my stomach twist. I dried my hands and turned to face him. "You've been mentioning Julia a lot lately?" Luke looked up, startled. His expression was a mix of confusion and guilt, a subtle flicker that I might have missed if I wasn't already suspicious. "She's on the same project team as me," he said with a shrug. "We've been working late trying to meet deadlines." Working late. Another detail that had begun to gnaw at me over the past few months. Luke's long nights at the office had become more frequent, accompanied by a growing distance between us. I wanted to believe him, to push the doubts aside, but my instincts wouldn't let me. That night, after Caleb was asleep, I finally worked up the courage to confront him. "Are you seeing someone else?" I asked bluntly. Luke's reaction was immediate. His eyes widened, and he laughed nervously, like the idea was absurd. "What? No, of course not. Why would you even ask that?" But his voice wavered, just enough for me to notice. I pressed on. "You've been distant, Luke. You're never home, and when you are, you're not really here. And then there's Julia." "There's nothing going on with Julia," he snapped, cutting me off. His frustration was palpable, but underneath it, I caught a glimpse of something else. Fear. I didn't push further that night, but the seed of doubt had taken root. A week later, my suspicions were confirmed. Luke came home late, his shirt wrinkled and his hair slightly mussed. He tried to play it off, but the guilt was written all over him. When I confronted him again, he broke. "It's over," he said, his voice trembling. It didn't mean anything. His confession hit me like a physical blow. I wanted to scream, to cry, to demand answers, but all I could do was stand there numb. It didn't mean anything. How could he say that when it had already torn our lives apart? While I was still reeling from Luke's betrayal, another unexpected upheaval arrived at my doorstep. Ethan, my older brother. I hadn't seen him in years, not since he'd spiraled into addiction and disappeared from our lives. Now here he was, looking gaunt but sober, with an apology in his eyes and a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "I need a place to stay," he said simply. I let him in, partly out of love and partly out of desperation for some kind of connection. Ethan's presence was both a comfort and a complication. He brought with him memories of our fractured childhood and unresolved pain, but he also brought a strange sense of stability. At least he was honest about his struggles, which was more than I could say for Luke. As Ethan settled into the guest room, I found myself leaning on him more and more. We'd always been close growing up, and despite the years apart, that bond hadn't completely faded. One night, after Luke had gone to bed, Ethan and I stayed up talking in the kitchen. We reminisced about our childhood, laughed about the silly things we used to do, and shared the weight of our current struggles. It was the first time in months that I felt understood, and that was the moment the cracks in my life began to shift, setting the stage for what was to come. The cracks in our marriage were too deep to ignore, no matter how hard we tried. Counseling felt like slapping a bandage on a wound that had long since festered. Luke and I would sit in those sessions, saying the right things, trying to piece together something that wasn't whole anymore. But every word felt rehearsed, every apology hollow. One evening, after yet another strained conversation about trust, I realized I couldn't keep pretending. We had reached a point where the effort to hold on felt heavier than the idea of letting go. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice trembling. Luke looked up from his side of the couch, his face a mix of confusion and exhaustion. What do you mean? I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. Us? This marriage. It's broken, Luke. And I don't think we can fix it. His shoulders sagged, and for a moment, I thought he might argue. But then he nodded, a small, defeated gesture. I don't know if we can either, he admitted quietly. That night, we sat in silence, the weight of our decision settling over us. It wasn't angry or explosive, just two people finally acknowledging that they drifted too far apart to find their way back. Luke moved out the next day. He packed his things while Caleb was at preschool, and we kept the goodbye brief. I didn't cry when he left, though I expected to. Instead, I felt an odd sense of relief, like a heavy weight had been lifted off my chest. Ethan was there when it happened, quietly supportive in the background. He didn't ask questions or offer unsolicited advice. He simply existed in my orbit, giving me the space to process everything at my own pace. Over the next few days, Ethan became my anchor. He was there for the quiet moments when the house felt too empty, for the afternoons when Caleb's laughter filled the air and reminded me why I needed to stay strong. One evening, after Caleb had gone to bed, I found Ethan in the kitchen. He was leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone, but he set it down when I walked in. You okay? He asked, his voice gentle. I nodded, though the truth was more complicated. I think so. It's just strange. I didn't realize how much of myself I'd lost trying to keep that marriage together. Ethan studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. You deserve better, he said finally. His words hung in the air between us, and for the first time, I let myself believe them. We talked for hours that night, about everything and nothing, our childhood, his journey through recovery, my hopes and fears for the future. There was a warmth in his presence, a sense of safety I hadn't felt in years. At some point, I realized how close we were standing. The soft glow of the kitchen light cast shadows across his face, highlighting the quiet strength in his features. Before I could second-guess myself, I leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't tentative or unsure like I might have expected. It was warm and steady, a spark igniting in the quiet of the night. For a brief moment, the world fell away, and all that existed was him and me. When we finally pulled apart, I searched his eyes for regret, but all I found was a quiet intensity. I shouldn't have done that, I whispered, though the words felt half-hearted. Ethan shook his head. Maybe we both needed it, he said softly. The kiss changed everything and nothing all at once. It was a moment of connection, of understanding between two people who had both been broken and were trying to find their way back to whole. That night, I went to bed feeling something I hadn't felt in years, hope. The kiss with Ethan marked a quiet shift in the fabric of my days. It wasn't something we spoke about or dissected, but it lingered in the unspoken spaces between us. The air carried a different weight now, charged, expectant, yet strangely comforting. Life after Luke's departure settled into an odd rhythm. The house, quieter but not empty, felt less like a void and more like a canvas waiting for something new. Caleb, blissfully unaware of the deeper currents beneath our lives, adapted quickly. His days were filled with school, games, and laughter, and he became a grounding force for me. Ethan's presence became indispensable. He slipped effortlessly into the routines of our little household, taking on tasks without being asked, his steady reliability a salve for my frayed nerves. He spent hours with Caleb, filling the void left by Luke, though never attempting to replace him. One evening, as the sun cast its golden glow over the porch, I stood by the window and watched Ethan. He was outside, leaning on the railing, his figure bathed in warm light. There was something about his stillness that drew me in, a quiet strength tempered by years of hardship. I found myself wondering when his presence had become so integral to my sense of stability. The memory of our kiss haunted me in a way that felt less like guilt and more like a promise. It wasn't a fleeting mistake but a moment of connection, born out of shared pain and unspoken understanding. I found myself thinking about it more often than I cared to admit, my mind drifting to the way his touch had felt, the way his presence steadied me. The weeks slipped by, and the bond between us deepened in subtle, unspoken ways. There were moments that seemed insignificant at first, a lingering glance, a brush of hands as we worked together in the kitchen, the way he instinctively knew when I needed space and when I needed someone beside me. Each moment built on the last, creating a foundation that felt steady, even in the face of uncertainty. One night, after Caleb had gone to bed, I sat on the porch, lost in thought. The scent of summer lingered in the air, mingling with the hum of cicadas and the distant rustle of leaves. Ethan joined me, his quiet presence a familiar comfort. I didn't need to look at him to know he was there. I could feel him in the subtle shift of the atmosphere. As the days passed, I began to accept what I had been too afraid to admit. Ethan had become more than just a part of my life. He had become a part of me. The realization wasn't sudden or dramatic, but a quiet unfolding, like the petals of a flower reaching toward the sun. The second kiss came unexpectedly, yet it felt inevitable. It wasn't a moment of hesitation or confusion, but one of clarity. In the quiet of the night, with the world around us hushed and still, we found each other again. There was no questioning this time, no need for justification. It was a simple, undeniable truth, a recognition of what had always been there, waiting to be acknowledged. In the days that followed, I found myself leaning into this new reality. Ethan and I didn't label what was happening between us. It didn't need labels. It was something deeper, something that transcended words. Together, we began to navigate the uncharted waters of a life that felt both fragile and full of promise. Watching Caleb play in the yard one evening, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. Ethan sat beside me, his presence steady and grounding. In that moment, I realized that healing wasn't about erasing the scars of the past. It was about building something beautiful in their place. The backlash came swiftly, an avalanche of condemnation that crushed any hope of quiet acceptance. My mother's voice on the phone was sharp, laden with disapproval that bled into every word. She didn't try to hide her disappointment. She wielded it like a weapon, slicing through my fragile resolve. "How could you?" was the refrain I heard over and over, not just from her but from everyone in the family who felt entitled to pass judgment. Ethan's history was dredged up like a piece of damning evidence, as if his past struggles invalidated his present self. To them, he wasn't my brother anymore, nor was he the man who had stepped up when I needed him most. He was a scandal, an aberration, a mistake I was foolish enough to make. Luke, of course, seized the opportunity to present himself as the victim. He painted a picture of betrayal, conveniently omitting his own infidelity that had set everything in motion. My parents sided with him, as did most of the extended family. Their loyalty wasn't about right or wrong. It was about maintaining appearances, about clinging to the illusion of a picture-perfect life. Ethan took the condemnation in stride, his calm demeanor masking the pain I knew he felt. He'd been here before, abandoned, shunned, treated as if his worth was something that could be debated. But this time he wasn't alone. I made it clear to him, to everyone, that we were a team now. Whatever storms came our way, we would face them together. The rejection stung, but it wasn't surprising. I'd spent most of my life trying to please people who could never be pleased, bending over backward to earn approval that was always just out of reach. Now, for the first time, I wasn't looking for their validation. I was looking forward, toward a life I could build with Ethan and Caleb, one that was ours and ours alone. The decision to move came easily. Staying in the same town felt suffocating, the weight of judgment pressing down on us like an oppressive fog. Ethan and I pooled our resources and found a modest home in a quieter place, far from the prying eyes and whispered gossip that had become so pervasive. The house wasn't much at first, a small, weathered structure on the edge of town, but it had potential. Ethan threw himself into fixing it up, his hands steady and sure as he transformed the space into something warm and inviting. Caleb loved the open yard, spending hours chasing butterflies and digging in the dirt while we worked. Slowly, a sense of normalcy began to take root. Our days were filled with the simple rhythms of family life. Cooking meals together, helping Caleb with his homework, and stealing quiet moments of connection when the house was still. I found work at a local library, a job that felt like a balm for my soul. Surrounded by books and the quiet hum of community, I rediscovered a sense of purpose that had been lost amid the chaos of the past year. Ethan, too, found his footing, taking on projects as a handyman and earning the trust of our new neighbors. The absence of my parents and the rest of the family was a hollow ache, but it was one I could live with. Their rejection wasn't about me, not really. It was about their inability to accept a version of me that didn't fit neatly into the box they constructed. What mattered now was the life I was building. The home filled with laughter and love, the partnership that felt as solid and unshakable as the ground beneath my feet. Ethan was more than just a second chance. He was a reminder that even in the face of loss and betrayal, it was possible to start over. In that moment, I knew I'd made the right choice. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would always be challenges, always whispers of the past trying to claw their way back. But we were stronger now together. This was my family. Imperfect, unconventional, but fiercely mine. The knock at the door came late one evening, sharp and insistent, cutting through the quiet hum of the television in the living room. I froze, my pulse quickening, as a familiar sense of unease washed over me. Ethan rose from his chair, his movements slow and deliberate, and went to answer it. Luke stood on the doorstep, his face shadowed in the dim porch light, but his anger was unmistakable. He was thinner than I remembered, his expression a mix of defiance and desperation. He had always been good at masking his intentions behind a polished veneer, but that night, his emotions bled through the cracks. I stayed where I was, watching from the living room as their conversation escalated. Ethan's posture remained steady, his voice calm but firm, while Luke's grew more animated, his gestures sharp and erratic. When Ethan stepped back and shut the door, locking it behind him, Luke's muffled voice carried through the wood, promising consequences that sent a chill down my spine. The threats didn't stop there. Over the next few days, Luke began a campaign of harassment that felt both personal and calculated. He called at odd hours, leaving voicemails laced with veiled threats and accusations. He showed up unannounced at Caleb's school, demanding to see him, even though our custody arrangement gave him no such rights. He even spread rumors in town, attempting to paint Ethan and me as unstable and unfit. It was clear he wasn't going to back down. His pride, his ego, whatever it was, had been wounded, and he was determined to make us pay for it. Ethan and I knew we couldn't let this continue. The safety of our home, our family, and Caleb was at stake. After consulting with a local attorney, we decided to take legal action. The process was grueling, dredging up memories I would have preferred to leave buried, but it was necessary. The court filings painted a damning picture of Luke's behavior, his harassment, his attempts to intimidate, and his complete disregard for the boundaries we had set after our divorce. Our lawyer was sharp and relentless, countering every baseless accusation Luke threw our way with cold, hard evidence. The court hearings were a different kind of battlefield, one that required a patience and resolve I wasn't sure I had. Seeing Luke across the courtroom, his eyes filled with resentment, was like staring into a mirror of my old life, the life I had fought so hard to leave behind. Through it all, Ethan remained my anchor. His presence beside me, calm and unyielding, reminded me of why we were doing this. We weren't just defending ourselves. We were protecting the life we had worked so hard to build. The judge's decision came as a relief. Luke was issued a restraining order, barring him from contacting us or coming near our home. His custody privileges were further restricted, allowing only supervised visits with Caleb. It wasn't a total severance, but it was enough to give us the peace and protection we needed. In the days that followed, the tension in the house began to ease. Caleb, blissfully unaware of the storm that had raged around him, continued to thrive in the stable environment we had created. Ethan and I found solace in the quiet moments, in the knowledge that we had faced the worst and come out stronger. As the weeks turned into months, the memories of that time began to fade, replaced by new ones, of laughter, of growth, of a life that felt truly ours. Ethan and I celebrated small victories, milestones that might seem insignificant to others but carried deep meaning for us. On a bright autumn morning, as we stood together watching Caleb kick a soccer ball in the yard, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The shadows of the past would always linger, but they no longer defined us. This was our life now, a life built on resilience, on love, and on the unshakable belief that no matter what came our way, we would face it together. Life settled into a quieter rhythm after the storm passed. The chaos Luke had brought with him seemed to dissipate as the seasons changed, leaving us to rediscover what peace felt like. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from forgetting, it was deeper, rooted in the understanding that we had survived and could now truly begin to thrive. Ethan and I found joy in the simple routines of daily life. Mornings began with the sound of Caleb's laughter echoing through the house as he rushed to get ready for school. Ethan's steady hands turned the kitchen into a sanctuary where breakfast was more than a meal. It was a moment of connection. We lingered over coffee, talking about everything and nothing, savoring the quiet before the day began. Caleb's resilience amazed me. Despite everything, he adapted with a grace that belied his young age. He loved our little home and the life we were building. The backyard became his kingdom, where he chased dreams as wild and boundless as his imagination. Ethan was his hero, a constant presence who taught him how to build things, how to be curious, and most importantly, how to be kind. The community we had chosen to call home embraced us in ways I hadn't expected. Our neighbors, once strangers, became friends. They didn't ask questions about the past. They only offered kindness and warmth, weaving us into the fabric of their lives. Ethan and I made it a point to nurture our relationship amidst the bustle of work and parenting. We carved out time for each other, whether it was a quiet evening walk or simply sitting together after Caleb had gone to bed, sharing stories and dreams. There was a calmness to our love, a steady flame that burned brighter with each passing day. It wasn't just a vague hope anymore. It was a series of tangible moments waiting to be lived. I saw Caleb growing up, thriving in the safety and love we had created. I saw Ethan and me growing older together, weathering life's storms with the same unwavering commitment that had brought us this far. There were still echoes of the past, of course. Luke's presence lingered at the edges of my mind, a reminder of what we had endured. But those memories no longer had power over me. They were just fragments of a life I had left behind, lessons that shaped but did not define me. Caleb was playing in the yard, his laughter carrying on the warm breeze. We stood there together, watching him, and I felt a swell of gratitude so profound it left me breathless. This was the life I had fought for, a life built not on perfection but on perseverance. A life where love wasn't just a feeling but a choice, made every day in the face of everything we had overcome. As the stars began to dot the sky, I leaned into Ethan, letting the weight of the moment settle over me. It wasn't a grand finale or a dramatic conclusion. It was simply us, together, living the life we had chosen. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. A year had passed, and the world felt both unfamiliar and achingly the same. The laughter in the house was quieter now, softer echoes of what once filled every corner. Ethan was gone, the man who had given me hope, who had shown me that love could be steady and true, had been taken from us too soon. It was a car accident, swift and merciless. He had been driving home after picking up some supplies for a project he was excited about, a new bookshelf Caleb had asked for. The kind of simple, thoughtful task that embodied everything Ethan was. One wrong turn, one careless driver, and suddenly he wasn't coming home. Grief became my constant companion in the months that followed. At first, it was overwhelming, a tidal wave that left me gasping for air. Caleb cried himself to sleep most nights, and I tried to hold it together for him, even when I felt like I was shattering inside. Ethan had been our anchor, and without him, we both drifted, trying to find our way back to something resembling stability. But life, as it always does, moved forward. The days stretched into weeks, and then months, each one a small step away from the rawness of that loss. I found solace in routine, getting Caleb ready for school, tending to the garden Ethan had loved, working at the library where the steady hum of quiet voices and turning pages gave me a sense of normalcy. Caleb, in his way, was my salvation. His resilience reminded me that life wasn't just about what we lost, but about what we still had. He talked about Ethan often, his memories bright and vivid, keeping his presence alive in our home. Sometimes, I'd catch him sitting in Ethan's old chair, a book in his lap, as if trying to emulate the man who had been such a vital part of his life. Ethan had taught us how to endure, how to love, and how to rebuild. Those lessons became my guide. Slowly, I began to see the beauty in small things again. The warmth of the sun on my face, the smell of fresh bread baking, the sound of Caleb's laughter when he played with the dog Ethan had insisted we adopt. One evening, I found myself in the backyard, the same place where we had celebrated so many milestones together. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. I closed my eyes and let the moment wash over me, feeling both the ache of his absence and the quiet strength he had left behind. Life without Ethan wasn't what I had planned or wanted, but it was still life. I owed it to him, and to myself, to live it fully, to honor the love we had shared by creating something meaningful with the time I had left. As the first stars appeared in the sky, Caleb called out from the house, asking what was for dinner. I smiled, wiping a stray tear from my cheek. The pain was still there, a dull ache that would never completely fade, but so was the love, and that love would carry us forward. Ethan's absence had left a void, but it hadn't taken away everything. I still had Caleb, our memories, and the quiet strength to keep going. And so I did.